e-cigarettes and Juul. We hope this will answer some of your questions about these products, as well as give you an idea of what can be done to combat the surge in usage among youth. First, let's take a look at some words that have become popular within the past few years. Words to know: e-cigarettes. E-cigarette is an electronic device containing a nicotine-based liquid that is vaporized and inhaled, used to simulate the experience of smoking tobacco. Vaping is the action or practice of inhaling and exhaling the vapor produced by an e-cigarette or similar device. Juul is a type of popular e-cigarette. Juuling is a slang term for the recreational use of the leading brand of electronic cigarettes, Juul. Juul pods are cartridges that contain e-juice for the Juul. Nicotine is a toxic, colorless, or yellowish, oily liquid that is the chief active constituent of tobacco. It acts as a stimulant in small doses, but in larger amounts blocks the action of autonomic nerve and skeletal muscle cells. Nicotine is also used in insecticides. Vapor is a substance diffused or suspended in the air, especially one normally liquid or solid. Aerosol is a substance enclosed under pressure and able to be released as a fine spray, typically by means of a propellant gas. E-juice is the liquid that is in e-cigarette or a Juul pod. Combustible tobacco, capable of igniting and burning and typically found in tobacco cigarettes or pipe tobacco. The 2018 National Youth Tobacco Survey results showed a dramatic increase in the youth rates for both middle and high school students from 2017 to 2018. In middle schools, a 48% increase occurred from 3.3% to 4.9%. Roughly 570,000 of all middle school students who have used an e-cigarette in the last 30 days. In high schools, a 78% increase occurred from 11.7% to 20.8% of all high school students. Roughly 3 million who have used an e-cigarette in the last 30 days. The stark rise has been likely caused by a type of e-cigarette called Juul, which now controls 75% of the market share. This chart represents the number of middle and high school students that have ever used an e-cigarette based on the 2017 Youth Risk Behavior Survey. Considering the increase in youth e-cigarette use in 2018, as we saw on the previous slide, we fear these numbers are even higher. The optimum time to prevent the onset of health-compromising behaviors is the grade before they start becoming prevalent. This national representative data says prevention should start in 5th grade. We do not have data on e-cigarette use in elementary school at this time. There is caution as not to introduce a behavior they have never thought of, so care must be taken and education messages should be limited to establishing a negative attitude. We want to prevent youth from ever picking up the e-cigarette habit. So what are the components of an e-cigarette? All e-cigarettes contain 4 basic parts: a battery, a microprocessor, a heater or atomizer, and cartridge or tank. There are many variations of the mechanism, but the basic process is the same. The microprocessor senses when the user inhales on the end of the e-cigarette, and on this cue instructs the heater, atomizer, to vaporize the liquid, which the smoker inhales through the mouthpiece. The vapor is then drawn into the lungs the same way that a regular cigarette is inhaled. E-cigarettes come in several different forms: disposable, rechargeable, tanks, and refillable. The pictures in the red box number 1 show some examples of disposable e-cigarettes. These e-cigarettes often resemble the shape and or look of traditional cigarettes and are intended to be used until the liquid runs out, at which point they are to be discarded. In box number 2 has some examples of tanks. Tanks are large e-cigarettes with a rechargeable battery and a large refillable cartridge. In box number 3 is an e-cigarette, which is a sarin drop and is a refillable pod designed to look like the shape of a teardrop and is often referred to as a drop by young adults. In box number 4 is the latest product in the e-cigarette epidemic, is the Juul. Juul uses small disposable pods that insert into the larger Juul device, which is rechargeable. A Juul device could easily be confused for a USB drive, and they can even be charged in laptops or computers. Students who use a Juul device may not consider themselves as vaping or using an e-cigarette, but Juuling. Students who use Juul may also refer to inhaling their Juul as a Juul rip. In some schools, students even refer to their bathrooms as Juul lounges. Juul continues to lead the e-cigarette company's market share by increasing dramatically in less than a year to 75% of the market share as reported by Nielsen in October 2018. Juul closed out the 2018 year with 75.8% of the market share. Despite the recent scrutiny with Juul and the increase in the number of young adults using Juul, it hasn't affected its popularity and market share. Juul continues to dominate the e-cigarette industry, only down in sales by 0.5% in the first 2 weeks of January 2019. Juul pods have an incredibly high nicotine concentration, which puts each puff from a Juul on par with the nicotine delivered in a puff from a traditional cigarette. This is not the norm for e-cigarettes. In fact, Juuls are more than double the maximum concentration allowed in the European Union, and the sale of Juul devices was recently banned in Israel because of the remarkably high nicotine content. The amount of nicotine in a single Juul pod is equal to the amount of nicotine found in an entire pack of cigarettes, and includes roughly the same number of puffs, which is 200. There are more than 8,000 different flavors of e-juice and counting. The use of flavors to mask the harshness of tobacco is a seductive and deceptive marketing technique that has been used by the tobacco industry for decades, including products like menthol cigarettes or fruit-flavored cigars. But e-cigarette vapor lacks the harsh burn of traditional cigarettes or cigars, making that first puff that much friendlier on the palate and thus easier for kids to take up the habit. According to the Journal of the American Medical Association, 81% of kids who ever used tobacco products started with a flavored product. It is important to know while FDA has taken steps to change e-liquid packaging and has discussed banning flavors of e-liquid, flavored e-liquid is still on the market. Many youth think that when they vape or Juul, they aren't consuming nicotine. Yet 99% of the e-cigarettes sold in the convenience stores, supermarkets, and similar outlets in 2015 contained nicotine. Beyond nicotine, any substance that can be transformed into a liquid can be used in an e-cigarette, including other narcotics like marijuana. Using nicotine in adolescence can harm parts of the brain that control attention, learning, mood, and impulse control. Each time a new memory is created or a new skill is learned, stronger connections or synapses are built between brain cells. Young people's brains build synapses faster than adult brains. Nicotine changes the way these synapses are formed, interfering with the brain's sensitive pleasure and rewards feedback loop. Because of this, nicotine in adolescence may also increase risk for future addiction to other drugs. E-cigarette use has been shown to increase the risk of ever using combustible tobacco cigarettes among young adults and youth. Young adults who use e-cigarettes are more than 4 times as likely to begin smoking cigarettes within 18 months compared with their peers who do not vape. There is a positive reinforcement with nicotine addiction and a physical dependence to avoid withdrawal symptoms. As someone who uses a nicotine product, the chemical is absorbed into the system and mood and pleasure centers are aroused. The tolerance and physical dependence for the substance increases as use continues. Going without nicotine can produce withdrawal symptoms as well as craving for more nicotine. Then the cycle repeats. Now knowing some of the dangers of using nicotine products, let's take a look at some of the signs and symptoms to look for in your young adult. Psychological distress and lack of impulse control, meaning they could be irritable, anger, impatience, and have a lot of anxiety. Difficult in concentrating, cognitive and performance impairment. Change in hunger and eating patterns. That could be weight loss or weight gain. Increased craving for tobacco or nicotine. Sudden interest in burning scented candles or incense. Sudden use of cheap perfume or cologne. Missing phone chargers as they can be modified to charge a Juul. And the negative change in grades. The vapor produced and inhaled when using an e-cigarette or Juul is not harmless. In fact, it can often contain many harmful ingredients. While e-cigarette vapor generally contains fewer harmful chemicals than smoke from burned tobacco, it is important to keep in mind the difference between less harm and harmless. Jumping out of a third-story window will cause less harm than jumping out of the 10th floor, but neither is harmless. E-cigarette juice, e-juice, is a liquid that is heated to become the inhaled vapor. This is the same with Juul devices. The e-juice may contain cancer-causing chemicals, heavy metals such as nickel, tin, and lead, and almost always contain the addictive tobacco-derived compound nicotine. The nicotine content and concentration may vary, But as we'll learn, labels aren't always true an indicator of what's inside the e-juice. Some of the ingredients in e-cigarette vapor could be physically harmful to the lungs in long term. For example, some e-cigarette flavorings may have been deemed safe to eat, but not to inhale. It is difficult for consumers to know what e-cigarette products contain because labeling requirements are limited and inconsistently applied. For example, some e-cigarettes marketed as containing 0% nicotine have been found to contain nicotine. These graphics from the National Institutes of Health illustrate some of the points we discussed in the previous slide. The top chart shows e-cigarette use among teens as a predictor of future use of traditional tobacco products, including cigarettes, cigars, and hookahs. 30.7% of teen e-cigarette users started smoking within 6 months, while 8.1% of non-users started smoking. The second figure shows the knowledge gap that students have about e-juice ingredients. What we see is not just that 13.7% of teens don't know what's in their e-cigarette, 66% believe it's just flavoring. As we learned earlier, there are many different chemicals in e-cigarette vapor, and more often than not, there is nicotine. According to the Truth Initiative, 99% of e-cigarettes sold in 2015 contain nicotine. Manufacturers don't have to label or report the ingredients, so users don't know what's actually in them. A major concern about e-cigarettes is the pervasive advertising. According to the National Institutes of Health, 7 in 10 kids are regularly exposed to e-cigarette advertisements. The charts at the bottom show a breakdown of where middle school, light orange, and high school, dark orange, students are being exposed to these ads. Among middle school students, 52.8% are exposed to retail ads, 35.8% to internet ads, 34.1% to TV and movie ads, and 25% to newspaper and magazine ads. Among high school students, 56.3% are exposed to retail ads, 42.9% to internet ads, 38.4% to TV and movie ads, and 34.6% to newspaper and magazine ads. It is important to teach kids to recognize e-cigarette ads, which can be stealthy and subtle in the social media, so they can understand when they're being sold something. This is one of the focuses of the Catch My Breath program. Let's recap the major learning points so far. 1. Nicotine is a highly addictive and can harm brain development in adolescents up to the age of 25. The health effects of inhaling chemicals such as lead, diacetyl, nickel, and tin that are found in e-liquid juice are unknown. And the rates of e-cigarette use among youth across the nation continue to rise, and evidence is showing that youth who use e-cigarettes are more likely to use combustible compared to those who never use e-cigarettes. The resocialization and normalization of youth tobacco use is evident and will continue to rise unless something is done. The youth e-cigarette and Juul problem have been widely reported by news outlets locally and nationally. These 3 stories, which came out over the summer, discuss the problem and spotlight schools and districts that are combating youth use with the Catch My Breath program. Now I'd like to show you a short video from CVS in a school in New York City School District.
Why do you think that e-cigarettes and the tobacco industry make e-cigarettes with candy flavors like gummy bears, cotton candy, or s'mores? Rocky?
It's because they want to attract the young generation.
6th graders at PS 19 in the Bronx are learning about the dangers of vaping.
It's very harmful.
They're taking part in the Catch My Breath e-cigarette and Juul prevention program, aimed at combating the skyrocketing use of e-cigarettes among American children and teenagers.
Youth who use e-cigarettes are more likely to go on to use conventional cigarettes.
The American Academy of Pediatrics released a new policy statement Monday, calling for new federal regulations, including setting a minimum age of 21 to buy the products, banning online sales and youth-targeted marketing, and stopping production of certain flavored e-cigarette products.
E-cigarettes are not safe because they contain toxic chemicals, many of which that are found in cigarettes, as well as nicotine, which we know is an addictive substance.
Catch My Breath was developed for 6th through 12th graders. It's now being taught in 20 states and reaches 30,000 students.
What I liked about the program was it did a lot of group activities that came up with ways to be self-reliant, to get away from peer pressure.
Students we spoke to seem to be getting the message.
If you know what's inside of it and if it could be harmful, then it's easy to say no.
Would you ever smoke e-cigarettes?
No. Now that I learned that it's really bad, I definitely will not do it.
The program is expected to expand to 200,000 students next year.
So pat yourselves on the back.
Hillary Lane, CBS News, Bronx, New York.
So what can be done? Catch My Breath is the #1 best practice youth e-cigarette and Juul prevention program used in 47 states and counting and has been featured in Edutopia, CNN, CBS, and CNBC. The program was developed by the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston School of Public Health and has been shown to be effective in scientific testing. By adopting the program at your school, you'll be joining more than 680 other middle and high schools that have decided to fight back against the rising youth e-cigarette epidemic. The program has a broad network of support among the public health community, and Catch Global Foundation is available to help with and support with any of your implementation needs. Based on our recent data evaluation, implementing the Catch My Breath program has the following impact. The average 7th grade class in the U.S. public schools is approximately 192 students. If nothing is done, we project 17 of those 7th grade students will try an e-cigarette by the end of the 2018-2019 school year. If a school implements Catch My Breath, 8 of those students, 45%, will not try an e-cigarette this year. If every public school in the country implemented Catch My Breath, 153,600 fewer 7th grade kids would try e-cigarettes this year alone. This is a testimonial from a student in Illinois after finishing the Catch My Breath program. When he was asked if he was a current e-cigarette user, what is your choice regarding e-cigarettes? I choose to do it, but after recent thoughts and ideas in this class, I have chosen to stop. Once they are hooked, they are hooked. We need to treat addiction like a disease. Remember, there are no acceptable pharmacological treatments for youth. So what can we do? Education should not be a punishment. Have an open conversation with your student or child. Talk to fellow parents and teachers about shared concerns. Talk to school administrators about concerns. Find out what your school policy is regarding use or possession of e-cigarettes. Understand that addiction is a disease. Catch My Breath is available to your school for free thanks to generous funding support from CVS Health. The program aligns with national academic and Common Core standards, as well as the SHAPE Health Education standards. During the 4-session peer-led program, students will receive information regarding e-cigarette and Juul products and learn about the marketing tactics used to lure youth into believing they are fun and harmless. Students will also practice communication and decision-making skills to avoid peer pressure to use e-cigarettes and Juul. The program is available for grades 6 through 12 and may be taught multiple years as the content progresses in complexity from year to year. For questions about the program or e-cigarette prevention in general, please feel free to contact the Catch My Breath Program Director, Marcella Bianco. The QR code on the screen links you to our parent involvement page. Stay informed with email updates. We promise to keep our emails to a minimum and the content relevant to you and your community. Help us keep Catch My Breath up to date with a small donation. Your support allows us to keep schools informed about the latest trends and science surrounding youth and vaping.